Today, we journey back to the bone-chilling winter of 1943, where a freight train rumbled through the snow-blanketed fields of Eastern Europe, dragging thousands of trembling souls gripped by despair. The screeching of iron wheels on the tracks mingled with faint, anguished moans, forming a mournful dirge echoing from the realm of the dead. Inside the cattle cars, not a sliver of light penetrated, only a suffocating darkness and the overpowering stench of sweat, urine, and death clinging to every breath. People, packed in like livestock, crushed together until they could barely breathe, had no food, no water, only fear gnawing at their hearts. This was no ordinary journey. No trip back home or a weekend getaway to Vegas. Their destination was Auschwitz, a name even the toughest Marines at Camp Pendleton would only whisper around a campfire, as if uttering it might summon a curse. Jake Miller, an American Jewish medic, now a prisoner on this doomed train, was among them. Just months earlier, he had been navigating Europe's battlefields, aiding Allied forces with a medical pack and an M1 Garand slung over his shoulder. But in a sudden operation, he was captured, stripped of freedom, and thrown into the darkness of this cattle car. Jake had heard rumors of the Nazis' labor camps, vague tales he'd dismissed as ghost stories over beers at a Fort Bragg bar. Now, as the train swayed through fog-shrouded forests, he sensed the terrifying truth awaiting. If this is a Hollywood flick, I'm definitely not the lead, he thought, clinging to a shred of humor to keep his mind sharp, the way he used to joke about the awful MREs in the service. As the train slowed, a sharp, acrid smell assaulted their noses, pungent and haunting. Some prisoners, exhausted and starving, whispered to each other that it was the scent of roasted chicken, that maybe a hot meal awaited at their destination. Their fragile hope pierced Jake's heart. With the keen instincts honed in military training, he knew it wasn't food. It was the smell of death, of burning flesh, as if the very air was saturated with atrocities. He clenched his fists, suppressing a shudder. Definitely not the smell of In-N-Out burgers after a football game, he muttered to himself, conjuring memories of carefree days back home to fend off the horror constricting his chest. The car's door slammed open, and the faint dawn light spilled in, offering no hope. SS soldiers in sleek black uniforms with eyes cold as steel stood in formation, rifles at the ready. The frenzied barking of guard dogs, the crack of whips slicing the air, and the screams of people herded onto the frozen ground formed a terrifying symphony, as if the gates of hell had swung wide. Jake gripped Sarah's hand, the nurse who'd stood by him through frantic frontline surgeries. Her face was pale, but her eyes still burned with defiance, the same resilience she'd shown during endless nights in field hospitals. "Hold on, Sarah," Jake whispered, his voice hoarse. "It's like that hell week at Pendleton. Just survive today." They were shoved from the car, barefoot on the icy ground, their breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. Before them loomed Auschwitz's iron gate, towering and menacing, with the words, "Arbeit macht frei," work sets you free, etched above. The curling letters mocked like a sick joke, as if freedom could exist in a place even sunlight seemed to shun. A chill ran down Jake's spine, not just from the cold, but from an eerie premonition. Something was wrong here, beyond human cruelty, as if the very ground beneath his feet bled and whispered horrific secrets. The SS began splitting the crowd, barking orders in harsh German. Children wailed, parents clung to their young, and the elderly trembled in hunger. Jake and Sarah, spared for their health and medical skills, were shoved to one side, but the weaker were herded toward the thickening smell of burning flesh. A child's cry, torn from its mother's arms, made Jake clench his fists, memories of his military oath flooding back. He'd sworn to save lives, but now he was powerless against this savagery. It's like a lieutenant leading the platoon into an ambush, he thought, grasping at chaotic wartime moments to stay calm. As they were marched through the gate, Jake realized Auschwitz wasn't just a concentration camp. It was another world where human laws were shattered, where death wasn't an end, but the start of a greater nightmare. In the shadows of the red brick buildings, he glimpsed a tall, hazy figure standing silently in a corner of the camp. Its glowing red eyes seemed to pierce his soul. Just sleep deprivation, Jake told himself, but his heart pounded as it had when he first held a rifle in Normandy. He didn't know that in Auschwitz the darkness hid not only human brutality, but supernatural mysteries waiting to engulf anyone who dared cross this gate of hell. A thick fog enveloped the barren ground before Auschwitz's gate, where thousands of trembling souls stood packed together, their breaths forming white clouds in the biting dawn chill. The snarling of guard dogs, the crack of whips slicing the air, and the desperate screams blended into a horrific symphony, as if the heavens themselves groaned at the atrocities about to unfold. At the center of the chaos stood a man in a white coat, holding a conductor's baton, his eyes as cold as night vision lenses scanning the crowd. This was Dr. Michael Kruger, whispered among prisoners as the Angel of Death. With a calm flick of his hand, he decided the fates of thousands. To the right, a path to forced labor and slow death. To the left, a door to immediate oblivion. Jake Miller, the American Jewish medic, felt his heart clench as the crowd was divided. Thanks to his robust health and battlefield medical experience, he and Sarah, the nurse who'd stood by him through frantic field surgeries, were shoved to the right. But the anguished cries of children and the elderly herded to the left, where the stench of burning flesh grew thicker, sent shivers through him. The sight of mothers clutching their children, of trembling old men dragged away, seared into his mind like a scar that would never fade. It's like a lieutenant leading the platoon into an ambush, Jake thought, grasping at memories of his military days when he carried an M16 and believed courage could conquer anything. But at Auschwitz, courage seemed a feeble whisper against a storm of brutality. Kruger was no mere doctor. He was a fanatic, obsessed with Hitler's warped racial theories. To him, the prisoners weren't human but living specimens for his deranged medical experiments. His eyes gleamed with an eerie light, as if envisioning a future where his grotesque ideas would be hailed worldwide. Jake, with his medical training from Johns Hopkins, quickly caught Kruger's attention. He was assigned to the Sonderkommando, a group of prisoners forced to perform the camp's most horrific tasks, cleaning crematoria, handling corpses, and witnessing atrocities. No American soldier, not even those who fought in Normandy or Middle Eastern deserts, could fathom. "Welcome to the worst MRE in history," Jake muttered to himself, clinging to military humor to avoid drowning in horror. But each step he took in the camp's darkness was a descent deeper into hell. The crematorium, where Jake was tasked, was a realm of shadows and death. Its red brick walls reeked of ash and slaughter, as if the air itself were cursed. The roar of machinery, the shouts of SS guards, and the moans of other prisoners formed a chilling soundtrack. But what unnerved Jake wasn't just human cruelty. In the darkness, he began hearing strange sounds, not screams or clanging metal, but faint whispers as if the souls of the dead were trying to speak. These sounds crept into his mind, like a jammed radio during a jungle patrol in Vietnam, blurring the line between reality and hallucination. One night, while clearing ash from the crematorium, Jake felt a chill race down his spine, despite the blazing furnace nearby. He looked up and saw a tall, hazy figure standing silently in a corner. Its glowing red eyes seemed to pierce his soul, unblinking, emotionless. His heart pounded, as it had when he first gripped an M16 during the Normandy campaign, facing enemy fire. Just sleep deprivation, he told himself, trying to dismiss the fear with logic. But deep down, he knew it wasn't a trick of the mind. The figure was something supernatural, a sign of the curse enveloping Auschwitz. If this is a Hollywood horror flick, I'm suing the director, Jake thought, forcing a wry American quip to stave off terror. But his hands still trembled as he resumed his work. Each day, Kruger and the SS revealed more of their savagery. Jake watched healthy prisoners pushed into forced labor, their bodies wasting away from starvation and exhaustion. Those sent to the left, he knew, never returned. The cry of a child torn from its mother, the pleas of an old man beaten with a club, merged into an indelible memory. Jake clung to the camaraderie of his military days, when he'd share a last cigarette with squad mates during long battlefield nights. He thought of Sarah somewhere in the camp and vowed to survive, not just for himself, but for those he'd sworn to protect. But Auschwitz's darkness didn't come only from Kruger or the SS. It came from the whispers in the night, the glowing red eyes in the shadows, and the sense that every step was watched by an unseen force. Jake didn't yet know that in a place where death was the only certainty, restless spirits waited, ready to tell their stories through those like him, those still alive, but already consumed by the darkness of this hell. The morning fog draped a gray shroud over Auschwitz's barren yard, where thousands of prisoners stood trembling, awaiting their fates decided by the cold flicks of Dr. Michael Kruger's hand. Those herded to the left, mostly women, children, and the elderly, shuffled through the muddy path, their bare feet quaking on frozen ground. SS soldiers in gleaming black uniforms with emotionless eyes led them to a low red brick building marked with a sign reading "Bath and Disinfection." The promise of hot water and a warm meal drew faint smiles from some, exhausted after the grueling journey in cattle cars. A few children, innocent in their naivety, even skipped, clutching their mothers' hands and whispering hopes of reuniting with fathers or siblings. But from the crematorium not far away, Jake Miller, the American medic trapped in this nightmare, knew the horrific truth. This was no bathhouse. It was a gas chamber, a death machine cloaked in cruel lies. Inside the red brick building, the air was heavy and stifling, reeking of mold and death. Prisoners were ordered to strip, folding their clothes and placing shoes neatly on numbered benches. "So you can find them after your shower," an SS guard said, his voice flat, as if reciting a script. The lie, cold and ruthless, was designed to keep the crowd calm, to lead them docilely to their deaths without resistance. Young women, shy and terrified, clutched their bodies as they were stripped bare under the guards in different gazes. Children clung to their mothers, wide eyes puzzled by the oppressive air. Jake, though spared this scene, could imagine it vividly, like the grueling drills at Fort Bragg, where he learned to stay calm even as his heart pounded like it might burst. Definitely not a steam bath after a football game, he thought, clinging to American humor to fend off the crushing pain. They were herded into a long, dark chamber where strange metal columns rose from the floor, wrapped in wire like iron serpents. The steel door slammed shut, its bolts clanging with finality, severing all hope. The lights went out, darkness swallowing everything, leaving only gasping breaths and feeble pleas. Outside, an ambulance rolled up, bearing a Red Cross symbol, a sick mockery, as if life had any place here. SS soldiers, wearing gas masks, stepped out, carrying metal canisters of Zyklon B pellets. They poured the poison through concrete vents, the pellets falling like fateful stones. Inside, screams erupted, tearing through the chamber as the toxic cloud rose from the floor. Children and the weakest fell first, trampled in the panic of those desperate to survive. Cries, wails, then gradually silence. Only darkness and death reigned. Jake, standing a few hundred yards away in the crematorium, didn't hear the screams, but he felt the evil in the air, as if the ground itself bled. The acrid stench of burning bodies mingled with something heavier, something not of this world. He'd faced enemy fire in Normandy, navigated perilous jungles, but never had he known fear like at Auschwitz. Here, death wasn't just the end of a body, but the start of a greater nightmare where souls were trapped in eternal darkness. That night, as Jake cleared ash from the crematorium, the frigid air seeped through his tattered clothes. The furnace blazed, but its light couldn't dispel the surrounding darkness. He heard the faint whispers again, like a jammed radio during a desert patrol. Then, from a corner, a tall, hazy figure appeared, not walking but gliding over the piled corpses, weightless as a specter. Its glowing red eyes stared into Jake, unblinking, emotionless, as if judging him for surviving while thousands perished. His heart raced as it had when he first gripped an M16 facing enemies in Normandy. "Definitely not Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster," he muttered, forcing an American quip to quell the fear. But deep down, he knew it wasn't a hallucination from sleep deprivation or stress. It was something supernatural, a sign that Auschwitz was not just a place of human cruelty, but a gateway to another realm where restless spirits waited. Each pile of ash he cleared, each corpse he saw, was a reminder of life's fragility. Jake thought of Sarah somewhere in the camp and vowed to survive, not just for himself, but to tell this story. He recalled nights around campfires at military bases, swapping ghost stories about Area 51 or jungle phantoms in Vietnam. Those tales, though spooky, carried the warmth of camaraderie. At Auschwitz, there was no warmth, only darkness and ceaseless whispers. Jake clenched his fists, determined not to let fear defeat him. But as the mysterious figure glided past again, a chill raced down his spine, as if death itself stood behind him, whispering that here, even death was not the end. In the suffocating darkness of Auschwitz, where the acrid stench of crematoria mingled with despair, Dr. Michael Kruger and his SS colleagues turned the concentration camp into a vast laboratory where morality was crushed and humans were reduced to nameless lab rats. For Kruger, each prisoner was a chance to validate Hitler's warped racial theories, each body a piece in his grotesque puzzle. SS doctors in blood-stained white coats with eyes cold as steel conducted horrific experiments, testing vaccines, injecting live bacteria, even trialing chemical weapons. A massive pharmaceutical company, which Jake Miller, the American medic trapped in this nightmare, grimly dubbed the Nazi Walmart, funded it all. They supplied Zyklon B, the the mass murder poison, and countless experimental drugs, transforming Auschwitz into a death factory disguised as science. Sarah, the nurse who'd stood by Jake through frantic battlefield surgeries, was sent to the women's hospital block, a place where cries and moans never ceased. There, she saw hundreds of women deliberately infected with bacteria, streptococcus, tetanus, gangrene, to test new drugs. These women, their bodies wasting away and eyes hollow, collapsed in agony without a word of comfort. In a rare moment meeting Jake in a camp corner, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling but laced with military humor. "They've turned us into lab rats, but no cookie rewards like in training." Jake nodded, his heart aching, recalling days sharing awful MREs with squad mates at Fort Bragg when life was simpler than this nightmare. As part of the Sonderkommando, Jake was forced into tasks no soldier, not even those who fought in Normandy or Middle Eastern deserts, could imagine. He cleared ash from crematoria, saw bodies stacked like lifeless timber, and struggled to cling to his humanity. But Kruger soon noticed Jake's medical expertise honed at Johns Hopkins. One day, he assigned Jake a task that chilled him, examining two prisoners, a hunched father named John and his son David, a teenager with a deformed foot. Kruger, with fanatical eyes, believed they were living proof of his racial theories, perfect specimens to bolster the Nazis' scientific lies. Though heartbroken, Jake had no choice. He measured their bodies, recorded details, and talked with them to ease their fear. John spoke of starving days in the ghetto, of a wife who gave her food to save their son. David, with bright but frail eyes, shared dreams of running like other kids. Jake shared a warm meal with them, unaware it would be their last. With cold cruelty, Kruger ordered John and David killed after the examination. He tasked Jake with preparing their skeletons, as if they were mere artifacts for a twisted museum. Like I'm starring in the worst Hollywood horror flick, Jake thought, conjuring old movies to stay calm, but no director would yell cut here. Preparing the skeletons was a nightmare beyond any military duty. Jake had to place John and David's bodies in large iron vats, boiling them over an open fire in the camp yard. The smell of burning flesh, mixed with the crackle of flames, clung to his every breath. After 5 hours, as the flesh softened, he separated it from the bones, each motion a knife to his soul. When finished, he discovered a group of starving Polish prisoners, driven mad by hunger, had unwittingly eaten flesh from the vats. They collapsed, vomiting and horrified upon realizing the truth. Jake stood frozen, feeling his own humanity crumbling in Auschwitz's darkness. That night, as Jake arranged the skeletons on a table, the mysterious figure reappeared. It stood beside John and David's bones, its glowing red eyes staring, as if judging Jake for his role in this atrocity, however unwilling. "If this is Area 51, I'm requesting a transfer," Jake muttered, forcing an American quip to dispel fear. But the terror had taken root in his mind. The figure wasn't a hallucination. It was a spirit, a witness to unforgivable crimes, demanding justice. Faint whispers, like a jammed radio during a Vietnam jungle patrol, echoed in his head, reminding him that at Auschwitz, death wasn't the end, but the start of a curse. Jake thought of Sarah, of the other prisoners, and vowed to survive to tell this story. He recalled nights around campfires at military bases, when squad mates swapped tales of Bigfoot or Nevada desert ghosts. But here, there was no camaraderie's joy, only darkness and restless spirits. Each skeleton he prepared, each experiment he witnessed, was a reminder that Auschwitz wasn't just a place of human cruelty, but a gateway to a supernatural realm where forgotten victims waited for someone to hear their cries for justice. In the bone-chilling nights of Auschwitz, where the faint moonlight couldn't pierce the thick fog, the concentration camp was not just a prison of human cruelty, but a tomb for trapped souls. Every corner, from the ash-choked crematoria to the moaning hospital block, was steeped in a malevolent energy, as if the ground itself bled and whispered untold stories. Jake Miller, the American medic ensnared in this nightmare, felt the supernatural darkness growing more tangible. The faint whispers, once like wind through cracks, sharpened into cries of children, feeble pleas, and sometimes voiceless curses. They slithered into his mind like a jammed radio during a Vietnam jungle patrol, blurring the line between reality and illusion. One night, as Jake worked in the crematorium, the air was heavy and stifling, reeking of burned flesh. The furnace blazed, but its light couldn't dispel the surrounding darkness. He bent down, clearing ash, trying not to look at the shattered bone fragments, remnants of countless lives erased. Then a chill raced down his spine, as if someone stood behind him, breathing on his neck. Looking up, he saw dozens of hazy figures forming a circle in the shadows, their glowing red eyes staring, unblinking, emotionless. Their presence was heavy, like a judgment. Jake's heart pounded, as it had when he first gripped an M16 facing enemy fire in Normandy. Definitely not the SEALs coming to save me, he thought, forcing a military quip to quell the fear. He tried to run, but his legs felt anchored by an invisible force, as if the ground itself held him to witness Auschwitz's horrific truth. Jake wasn't alone in sensing the camp's curse. Sarah, the nurse who'd shared frantic frontline surgeries with him, was confined to the women's hospital block, where relentless, brutal experiments never ceased. In its dark corridors, where antiseptic mingled with blood, she began seeing apparitions. One night, checking the medicine stores under a flickering oil lamp, she glimpsed a small girl, her face pale as wax, standing in a corner. The girl's empty eyes locked onto Sarah, her gaunt hand pointing at a vial the SS doctors used to kill prisoners. Silent, the gesture carried a chilling warning, as if the girl's spirit sought to stop the next atrocity. Sarah froze, heart racing, recalling ghost stories swapped around Fort Bragg campfires. It was like she wanted to say something, she whispered to Jake during a rare meeting, her voice trembling but resolute. Jake, though skeptical, couldn't deny Auschwitz was cursed. Maybe Hitler opened a gate to hell and we're standing in the middle of it, he thought, half joking, half serious, conjuring Hollywood horror films to stay calm. Despite the enveloping terror, Jake and Sarah clung to the camaraderie of their military days when they'd share a last cigarette or joke about awful MREs. In rare moments amid the darkness, they secretly shared dry breadcrumbs, whispered survival plans, and dreamed of returning to America, eating tacos, drinking cold beer, watching the Super Bowl on a big screen. Those fragile dreams were their only light in the nightmare. But each passing day, death and the supernatural darkness tightened their grip. The whispers in the night grew urgent, a chorus of forgotten souls. The apparitions with their glowing red eyes appeared more frequently, not just in the crematoria or hospital, but in Jake's dreams, where they stood silently, waiting for him to speak for justice. Jake recalled nights at military bases when squad mates spun tales of Bigfoot or Nevada desert ghosts, stories both spooky and comforting with camaraderie's warmth. But at Auschwitz, there was no comfort, only the eerie silence of restless spirits. He thought of Sarah, of the other prisoners, and vowed to survive, not just to save his life, but to tell this story. Each apparition he saw, each whisper he heard, was a reminder that Auschwitz was not just a place of human cruelty, but a gateway to a supernatural realm where forgotten victims cried for justice. He clenched his fists, determined not to let fear defeat him. But as the mysterious figure glided past again, like a cold wind, a chill seeped into his bones. Here, even death wasn't escape, but an eternal curse, waiting for someone brave enough to break it. In the summer of 1944, as the Allies' advance drew closer, Auschwitz descended into desperate chaos. Distant gunfire echoed from the front lines, a whisper of hope. But within the concentration camp, darkness still reigned. Dr. Michael Kruger and his SS colleagues, like cornered beasts, accelerated their horrific experiments, as if racing to complete a perverse legacy before this hell closed. Laboratories reeked of blood and chemicals, crematoria roared ceaselessly, and prisoners' moans mingled with the acrid stench of death, forming an inescapable dirge. Jake Miller, the American medic trapped in this nightmare, and Sarah, the resilient nurse, though reduced to shadows of themselves, clung to their humanity. They secretly shared dry breadcrumbs, stole medicine to save frail prisoners, and whispered of returning to America, where they could savor In-N-Out burgers and watch the Super Bowl without death lurking. But even their courage couldn't dispel the supernatural darkness enveloping Auschwitz. Apparitions with glowing red eyes, like burning coals, appeared more frequently, not just in the crematoria or hospital block, but in the camp's darkest corners, where light dared not reach. They stood silently, like mute witnesses to millions of vanished lives, demanding justice with their terrifying presence. Jake, who'd faced enemy fire in Normandy, had never known fear like these specters evoked. They weren't hallucinations from hunger or stress, but a living curse woven into every brick of the camp, a reminder that at Auschwitz death wasn't an end, but the start of an untold story. One night, as Jake cleared ash in the crematorium, the air was heavy, as if the ground itself bled. The furnace blazed, but its light only highlighted the surrounding darkness. From a corner, the mysterious figure approached, tall and hazy, its red eyes piercing him. A voice, inhuman, cold, and sharp as a blade, echoed, "Tell our story." Jake flinched, collapsing into the ash, his heart pounding as it had when he first gripped an M16 in a Middle Eastern campaign. When he came to, he was alive, but the whisper clung to his mind, an unbreakable vow. "If I survive, I'll tell," he vowed, voice trembling but resolute, like when he swore to protect his squad. He felt the weight of those souls as if they'd chosen him to carry their story from Auschwitz's darkness. Time passed, and in January 1945, the Allies liberated Auschwitz. The Iron Gate, with its mocking Arbeit macht frei, swung open, revealing a world of ash and anguish. Jake and Sarah, among the few survivors, emerged with wasted bodies but unbroken spirits. Like soldiers surviving the fiercest battle, they carried memories of horrific experiments, cries from gas chambers, and specters that never left. The question of those apparitions haunted them lifelong. Were they stress-induced hallucinations, or was there truly a supernatural force at Auschwitz, a curse of millions of forgotten souls? Maybe one day ghost hunters will show up with night vision goggles and find out, Jake quipped, clinging to American humor as he left the camp. But his eyes still bore unerasable pain. Friends, The story of Auschwitz isn't just a dark chapter of history, but a testament to the courage and resilience of people like Jake and Sarah. They faced death, specters, and the darkness within their souls to bring this story to the world. If this tale moves you, hit the subscribe button, share it with friends in America, and spread the message of truth and justice. Leave a comment. What do you think those apparitions were? Join us next time as we uncover another mystery from history's shadows. See you then.